Hey guys, it's Maya, and today we're going to be going through my ranking of every Christopher Nolan film. I'd like to preface this video by saying I had the idea for it a while ago, but someone else beat me to it. Anyhow, Christopher Nolan has been one of my favorite directors ever since I saw Interstellar and Inception toward the beginning of the pandemic. I was floored by the sheer scale and ambition of those films, and it left me wanting to see more. I thought that my senior project would be the perfect opportunity to watch and review Nolan's entire oeuvre, so here we are. Before we go into the rankings, I just want to state that these are my opinions and mine alone. It's totally fine if you liked one of the movies that I disliked, or if you disliked one of the movies that I liked. Everyone is entitled to their own thoughts. And so, without further ado, these are my thoughts. I couldn't sleep. Insomnia is the one film that Christopher Nolan didn't write, and you can tell. The cinematography and visuals bear his signature style, but the story is altogether too straightforward and the dialogue too realistic to feel like a Nolan film. On paper, the concept of Insomnia sounds awesome. A cop descends into insanity while a murderer blackmails him about the accidental death of his partner, set in small-town Alaska. But the film itself just didn't deliver for me. It felt like a very generic neo-noir with a morally ambiguous hero, brutal crime, and themes of off-the-grid justice, all elements that Nolan did better with Batman. I also have misophonia with both auditory and visual triggers, so I could hardly look at the screen for half of the film because of Will Dormer's penchant for chewing gum. Which leads me to a more personal issue with the film, that it features too many things that I hate. Gum chewing, dead dogs, and older men having predatory relationships with teenage girls, the latter of which the film doesn't seem to treat with nearly the gravity it should. There were still elements I liked, though. The opening scene was really cool. The chase on the beach was incredibly atmospheric. The Alaskan setting, although they mostly filmed in British Columbia, was gorgeous. I liked Hilary Swank's character. The ferry scene was well done. Insomnia is an American remake of a Norwegian film, and Christopher Nolan bid to direct it after he enjoyed the Norwegian version so much. I'm a bit curious to watch the Norwegian film to see if I like it better, but overall, Insomnia is not for me. You know something's gone weird when the story behind the creation of a film is more interesting than the film itself. But I feel like this is the case with Following. Nolan funded the film with roughly $6,000 of his own money, rehearsed scenes extensively with actors to avoid wasting film stock, only used natural and available lighting, and turned family and friends' flats into sets. The resourcefulness on display is incredible, and it points to Nolan's talent as a filmmaker that he was able to accomplish so much on a budget of almost nothing. That being said, the film itself isn't my favorite. On my first watch, I didn't recognize the young man until he shaved and cut his hair, so I was really confused until about halfway through when I realized it was the same person, especially when he led Cobb to break into his own apartment. Also, the core of the film is supposed to be that the young man is infatuated with Cobb, which ultimately gets him into some major trouble, but we never really saw that fascination develop. I was left wondering why the young man kept following through with everything. And as an hour-long film, there should never be a dull moment, but I felt the plot begin to drag toward the middle. It picks up with the first twist, however, when the phone call ends. The achievements that Following made are undoubtedly incredible, and even though it isn't my personal favorite, it laid the groundwork for many good things to come. Dunkirk is a technological marvel. As a movie, it's merely solid. It feels like the film equivalent of an etude where the focus is on honing and flexing technical elements with less regard to the artistic feeling involved. With the relatively short runtime and 3 storylines, I was never really able to connect with any of the characters. There's very little development, and the plot is mostly driven by the external factors of the war itself, giving the film a contrived feel. However, as a spectacle, Dunkirk is absolutely glorious. The crew tried to use as few visual effects as possible, opting instead for real airplanes and ships restored to their historical states, and hiring experienced pilots and sailors to steer the crafts. Much of the filming was done on-site in the English Channel and off the coast of the Netherlands, with the director and camera crew in the water alongside the cast. The attention to detail and hands-on approach lends a very real, visceral feeling to the film, especially the terror of the numerous ship-sinking scenes. The effect is all the more drastic when recalling that this film was released in the same year as such CGI-heavy maximalist films as Justice League and The Last Jedi. It's undoubtedly a breath of fresh air in that regard. Hans Zimmer's score is immaculately crafted. The supporting cast, including Harry Styles fresh from One Direction and some other relative newcomers, do an excellent job. The cinematography is stunning. There are so many technical aspects of this movie that are absolutely wonderful, but if you look beyond the sheen, there's not much else there.
Oh, come on, Matt, why did you invite Bane?
The Dark Knight Rises feels like wasted potential, the movie. There are so many great elements that are right there but never get used or are used improperly, and it becomes incredibly frustrating to watch as an audience member. I think its biggest sin is that it tried to do too much, so every element just feels incomplete. With 3 heroes, an anti-hero, and 2 villains, alongside a large supporting cast that feels like an Inception family reunion, there's not much time to do much of anything. Nobody can ever top the Joker, but I did like Bane as a villain, especially more than any of the villains in Batman Begins. His physical presence is terrifying, and he leverages the power of the people to fell a profoundly unequal Gotham. Violent class struggles make for interesting tension, especially when the guy you're supposed to be rooting for is a billionaire. But we never really saw Bane's ascent as a demagogue, and for all his establishment in the first 2 acts as a serious threat to Batman, he faded out with a whimper at the end in favor of more stuff about Ra's al Ghul, who was never a super compelling villain in the first place. Bruce Wayne was lame and whiny for the first act of the film, and it fell out of character for the tough, disciplined man we saw in the other 2 films. The climax as a whole was a bit underwhelming, especially compared to the opening scene that only furthers my crushing fear of airplanes, and the football scene. Those 2 scenes were the highlight of the movie, but there's something big we're leaving out. Catwoman. I loved Catwoman so much in this film. Part of that is definitely because she reminds me of all the female spy characters that I would design when I was younger, but she's also just such a badass, and Anne Hathaway is clearly having a great time with the role. She was wasting time when she kissed Bruce, though, and I'll never forgive her for that. Overall, the highlights and the pitfalls make The Dark Knight Rises an uneven ride, but the enjoyable parts make up for the questionable bits. Mostly. I don't even know what to think about Tenet. I had originally put it close to the bottom of this list. After the first watch, I had no idea what was going on. But then I rewatched it after a weekend of thinking about it, and I liked it more. I realized after my second watch that I couldn't stop thinking about it. There's a haunting quality to the film that I can't quite explain, an emptiness that follows you like a ghost. And the mystique isn't even from the time travel aspects of the film, but the intensely human drama of a woman trapped in a gilded prison, unaware of the true danger she faces. At the same time, Tenet is a seriously flawed film. The concept of people and objects moving backwards in time is too hard to grasp in a 2.5-hour movie, especially when you have to simultaneously think about the action on screen. The dialogue would be almost impossible to follow without subtitles. And the opening scene at the Opera House, while cool, doesn't really connect with the rest of the film. And how can a movie be so smart and so dumb at the same time? How can there be enough thought to put the inverted characters in oxygen masks because of how air works, but so little thought that the good guy is the protagonist and the bad guys are antagonists? How can there be absolutely banger lines like anger scars over into despair alongside lines that verge on self-parody like, you see, Tenet wasn't founded in the past, it will be founded in the future. I will say that the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff does make for some interesting, intense action sequences, especially the car chase. And there's a certain raw brutality to some of the violence, like the kitchen fight, the guy being beaten to death with a gold bar, and, spoiler alert, Sador falling off the boat, that are refreshingly rare to find in a PG-13 movie these days, once again a result of Nolan's devotion to practical effects. The actors' performances are a mixed bag as well. John David Washington does what he can, but the script does not do him many favors, and the protagonist comes across as a bit dull. Christopher Nolan clearly wanted the protagonist and Neil to have good chemistry between them, but it feels forced. However, Elizabeth Debicki brings an incredible depth to her character, who might otherwise come off as a bit damsel-y, and Kenneth Branagh makes for a terrifying villain. I'm still not entirely sure what I think of Tenet, and I would advise you to watch it and rewatch it to see for yourself. If nothing else, Tenet is an experience. Also, I forgot to say this earlier, but the music in the car chase scene is really cool. And additional congratulations for further contributing to my fear of airplanes.
Let's start at the very beginning.
Batman Begins is just a good time. Although it was supposedly a darker, grittier take on the character after whatever the heck Batman and Robin was, it's still a remarkably fun movie that remembers not to take itself too seriously. After all, it's about a dude who dresses up like a bat to punch bad guys. I especially love the dialogue in this movie, which is epic and hilarious by turns. Alfred in particular has some real bangers. The scene at the docks where we first see Batman in action is awesome. I enjoy the production design as well, not following modern trends and actually keeping the action visible during the foggy climax. None of the three villains are particularly strong, however, and their evil plan is unnecessarily complex. If they have this destructive beam, can't they just use it on the city instead of doing the whole plan with the water main and hallucinogenics? The editing on the monorail fight is a bit excessive, which makes me think that Liam Neeson's presence just prompts quick cuts. Still, my gripes with Batman Begins are minor, and it's just such a fun watch. It also features random cameos from the cast of Following, which I think is pretty neat. Oh man, Interstellar. I first watched this movie toward the beginning of the pandemic with my family, and we watched it over 2 nights because it's so long. We left off the first night right when Cooper and Brand get back from the water planet, and I cried myself to sleep that night. I've never cried at a movie, but I've definitely cried thinking about this one. Interstellar is an emotionally devastating film. Even when I rewatched it for this video, I had to take a walk outside when I was done because it's so much to handle. The thought of watching your daughter grow up without you seemingly in the blink of an eye is almost too much to handle, and I can't imagine how much harder it hits for people who have children of their own. No other Nolan film makes me feel things as deeply as Interstellar, from the sadness of leaving family, to the awe of encountering space, to the mounting terror when you realize that the mountains are actually waves. The sound design and visual effects greatly enhance the mood of each scene. There are few words to describe Interstellar other than beautiful. That being said, it's not exactly perfect. For all the science-y things that went into making the film, consulting astrophysicists to accurately render black holes and depict the effects of relativity, some of the themes are decidedly unscientific.
Love isn't something we invented. It's observable, powerful.
And it makes for a weird tonal disconnect, at least for me. I also think the bits with Dr. Mann weren't entirely necessary to the story and only bloated the runtime. It did allow for the super cool silent explosion, though. I did greatly enjoy Cooper as a protagonist as well as Murph, but the rest of the characters were just kind of meh. Interstellar is not immaculate, but it sticks with me in a way that few other films can. When you learn the secret behind any magic trick, you wonder how you never figured it out before. The same goes for The Prestige. On my first viewing, I was absolutely floored by the twist at the end regarding Christian Bale's character. On second viewing, I couldn't believe all the clues I had missed hidden in plain sight. The masterful storytelling on display in The Prestige is beyond impressive. It mirrors itself. The plot is set up like the magic tricks central to the story. There is so much setup and payoff in every little moment. And I'm a sucker for a good descent into evil character arc, like Anakin Skywalker or Walter White. So I loved watching Hugh Jackman's character let his obsession get the best of him until he started doing the things he swore he would never do without even batting an eye. The escalation of the stakes is perfectly paced. My one minor problem is that Scarlett Johansson's character felt more like a plot device than a character, and I'd have liked to see her fleshed out more. Another interesting observation I had, not necessarily positive or negative, is that The Prestige doesn't really feel like a Nolan film. I think most of this comes from the production design. Nolan loves his steely grays and blues, so the warmer palette of the film feels like a contrast to his usual style. I did enjoy the historic setting, especially the design of the prison, and shout out to David Bowie for making a surprisingly good Nikola Tesla. Is The Dark Knight the best superhero film ever made? I don't know. Is it the best I've watched? Absolutely. I mean it in the best way possible when I say that the film feels like a never-ending nightmare. From start to finish, there is not a single moment where you feel you can let out your breath. Any fleeting sense of security is immediately ripped away. And the heroes being informed of the Joker's plans ahead of time only makes the effect that much worse as you see the same losing battles unfold over and over again. You immediately understand why Heath Ledger's Joker is one of the most iconic cinematic villains of all time. So much of this movie just works. It's psychological torment in the best way. The effect is only enhanced by the off-screen violence, which keeps the PG-13 rating but is almost more effective than showing it outright. Unfortunately, there are some things in my mind that hold it back from the top of the list. Most of the second half hinges on Harvey Dent's descent into corruption. However, I didn't think his relationship with Rachel was established enough to make it believable. And for all the talk about him as Gotham's true hero, we never really see him in action in the courtroom save for one scene. I would like to have seen more Dent-related character development in general. But setting all that aside, there's a reason why The Dark Knight still features so strongly in popular culture today. It's twisted, visceral, and endlessly quotable, and it speaks to the soul in a way that few films ever do. We're getting into the territory of films so well made that I can barely criticize them. The first of these is Oppenheimer. In fact, let's get my tiny piece of criticism, mostly a personal issue, aside right off the bat. There were a lot of white guys in suits who kept using each other's names, and I couldn't quite always remember which white guy in a suit went with which name. But honestly, I think that if that's the biggest problem in a film, then you have succeeded. Oppenheimer is an absolute tour de force. It fires on every single cylinder. Cillian Murphy not only nails Oppenheimer's physical presence, but he gives an outstanding performance as a man collapsing under his own moral weight. The supporting cast is killer, especially Emily Blunt as the absolute icon that is Kitty Oppenheimer, and Robert Downey Jr. as the petty, egotistical politician dead set on bringing about Oppie's downfall. The cinematography and editing, especially in the color sequences, are astoundingly creative and precise. Ludwig Göransson once again hits it out of the park with his tense, raw, incredibly affective score. Not once was I bored in a film full of guys sitting and talking, guys standing and talking, and guys walking and talking. Oppenheimer drew me into the screen and hardly ever let me go. Memento is a wild ride of a film. We first watched it in English class right around the same time we learned about DNA replication in biology, and all I could think about was how the color sequences were built in Okazaki fragments because I'm a freaking nerd. I feel like that one meme whenever I try to discuss this film with anybody. The ambiguity displayed, especially when we have just about the most unreliable narrator possible, means that Memento is the audience's film as much as it is the filmmaker's. There are near infinite interpretations you can have of the events on screen. And this, in my mind, is what makes Memento so compelling. It's a mind-bending mystery with a unique premise, one that will forever change the way you think about things. It's also strangely funny, although a few scenes are hard to watch. Looking at you, Natalie. Still, the relatively newbie actors give solid performances, and the film has a unique aesthetic, at once both barren and claustrophobic. Memento is a perfectly crafted puzzle box of a film, and I love it for that.
So you're saying that all those people in there are somehow trapped in one person's dream?
Guys, I love Inception, and every time I see it, I think I just love it more. It might just be my favorite movie, period. The efficiency in its storytelling is astounding. There is not a single line, scene, or shot that is wasted. Everything fits together so perfectly, making for such a satisfying conclusion until the last shot. I'm convinced that Christopher Nolan only included it to troll the fans that were still obsessing over the end of Memento. But still, Inception is such a good ride. It's a high-stakes heist with an emotionally grounded story, and the way that Cobb's backstory ties into the heist itself is almost perfect. All you want is for the characters to succeed, and you have to watch them fight through setback after setback to get there. I am also nothing short of obsessed with the production design. I'm a huge fan of surrealist art, so I love the Escher-inspired dream visuals, and the perfection-termed decrepit design of Limbo still haunts me. And massive shout out to the hallway fight, which might be one of the coolest fight scenes I've ever watched. The way they filmed it is incredible as well. Inception just works so well on every level. Well done, Nolan. Well done. Even my least favorite of Christopher Nolan's films are not bad by any objective means, which only serves as a testament to his filmmaking abilities. The guy is talented. This project has definitely reinvigorated my interest in film and filmmaking. Film is a medium where anything feels possible, where the only limits are your imagination. And after a marathon of watching and rewatching the same director, I have definitely picked up on Christopher Nolan's style. Christopher Nolan loves guys in suits, playing with time and familial ties as plot devices. He likes cool color palettes, overwhelming synthesizer music, and shots of people's faces cropped so close you can't see the top of their head. He recasts the same actors over and over again, which really makes me want to believe in a Nolan extended universe where Dom Cobb is married to Talia al Ghul and J. Robert Oppenheimer becomes the Scarecrow. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on Nolan's films as well. They're almost all crafted to warrant discussion, so let's discuss away. See y'all in Limbo. Peace.